Under the soft Jerusalem evening light, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu steps to the podium, his face marked with the exhaustion of months of crisis, but also with the cautious resolve of a man who has spent every waking hour confronting the cost of war. But the most difficult challenge remains, bringing home all the remaining hostages, 20 hostages alive and 28 who were captured and killed. Cameras flash, the hum of reporters fills the room, and the silence before his words feels heavy, almost sacred. He begins slowly, his voice low but firm. The most difficult challenge remains, bringing home all the remaining hostages, 20 hostages alive and 28 who were captured and killed. That single sentence encapsulates months of agony, negotiation, and political pressure. The desperate effort to retrieve those taken from their homes and communities during one of the darkest moments in Israel's history. Netanyahu's tone, unusually subdued, signals both sorrow and determination. For a leader often accused of defiance and stubbornness, this is a rare moment of humility, an acknowledgement that even the strongest army and the most sophisticated intelligence network could not protect every citizen. As he continues, Netanyahu's words begin to weave between grief and hope. He speaks of the long nights of waiting, the families who gather at Hostage Square in Tel Aviv holding candles and photos, refusing to let the memory of their loved ones fade. He recalls the difficult intelligence briefings, the coded communications from Gaza, and the intense diplomatic back-channeling that led to the recovery of some hostages, while others were confirmed dead. The Prime Minister pauses, his gaze momentarily fixed on the journalists before him, then adds that he hopes the country could soon experience a day of national joy, perhaps as early as Monday evening, when the remaining captives return home. For Israelis, those words carry a resonance that goes far beyond politics. A day of national joy is not merely a celebration of victory or peace, it is a collective sigh of relief, the restoration of human dignity after months of anguish. Behind Netanyahu's optimism lies a web of ongoing negotiations, quiet talks mediated through Egypt, Qatar, and the United States, where every clause and name on a list represents a life in the balance. In the days leading up to this announcement, Israeli intelligence officials had provided the cabinet with an updated assessment of the hostages taken into Gaza. 20 remain alive and 28 are confirmed dead. That grim arithmetic has haunted every meeting of the war cabinet, every prayer vigil, and every television debate. Even the military's recent advances into Gaza's southern corridor, initially hailed as a tactical breakthrough, were overshadowed by the question that now defines the entire conflict: how to bring the hostages home without triggering another escalation. Netanyahu's remarks tonight also serve a dual purpose: to inform the nation and to prepare it emotionally for the next phase. The hostages' fate has become the moral core of Israel's internal debate. Protesters in Tel Aviv demand that every negotiation prioritize the captives' return, even if it means difficult concessions to Hamas. Hardliners, meanwhile, argue that any deal risks emboldening militants and undermining deterrence. Between those extremes stands Netanyahu, caught between grief-stricken families and a restless security establishment that still sees unfinished business in Gaza. But his speech tonight strikes a different tone, not the rhetoric of vengeance, but of closure. Observers say it marks one of his most introspective appearances since the war began nearly 2 years ago. The backdrop itself tells a story: the Israeli flag draped behind him, the seal of the Prime Minister's office visible on the podium, and the absence of any military officials beside him, a visual cue that this moment is about humanity, not strategy. Throughout the speech, Netanyahu's phrasing is deliberate. The mention of 20 alive and 28 killed is not just statistical precision, it is a moral reckoning. Each number represents a family, a home, a story cut short, or still in limbo. Israeli media has already begun to publish partial lists of those identified, while defense sources caution that the figure could shift as forensics teams analyze remains retrieved from tunnel complexes and bombed-out safe houses. Internationally, the statement resonates beyond Israel's borders. In Washington, senior officials in the Trump administration who have brokered the ongoing Gaza ceasefire plan are quick to frame Netanyahu's remarks as proof that progress is being made. The US-led framework, which promises the release of all remaining hostages in exchange for a large-scale Palestinian prisoner release, has entered what diplomats describe as its final validation phase. Egypt and Qatar, acting as mediators, have quietly shuttled between Tel Aviv, Doha and Cairo to secure lists of names and guarantees of safety for those being exchanged. American forces, already deployed in small numbers across the Sinai and eastern Mediterranean, are preparing to monitor the truce enforcement mechanisms. If all goes according to plan, the first group of hostages could cross the Rafah corridor within days, an event that Israeli media has already dubbed Operation Homecoming. Back in Jerusalem, Netanyahu's words carry an emotional weight that no political spin can conceal. He speaks about the parents who still wait by the phone, the soldiers who risked their lives to extract fragments of proof from inside Gaza, and the volunteers who kept the issue alive in global consciousness. He thanks the mediators, the allies, and the international community. But above all, he thanks the families for what he calls their unbreakable spirit. He does not mention Hamas by name in this segment, a calculated omission that suggests the focus tonight is not on blame, but on closure. Yet the subtext is clear. Israel will continue its pressure until every hostage, living or deceased, is returned. In his words, "We will not rest until every son and daughter of Israel is home." That line, delivered with quiet force, draws subdued applause from those in the room. For many, it encapsulates the painful contradiction of this moment, a nation both weary of war and unwilling to move on until its wounds are properly accounted for. As the speech continues, Netanyahu briefly shifts toward the broader picture. He speaks of the Gaza ceasefire plan, crediting our American friends for their tireless efforts to bridge impossible gaps. He mentions the Trump administration's recent success in securing Israel's conditional approval of the multi-phase deal, under which Hamas would release all hostages in exchange for a phased withdrawal of Israeli forces and a monitored reconstruction plan for Gaza. This could be the beginning of a new chapter, Netanyahu says, but quickly adds, only if the other side upholds its word. Analysts note that this balancing act, hope tempered by skepticism, reflects Netanyahu's political survival instinct. Domestically, his coalition depends on both right-wing nationalists and centrist partners. Any appearance of weakness could trigger internal revolt, yet any refusal to engage in diplomacy could alienate international allies whose support is critical for Israel's post-war reconstruction agenda. Still, tonight's tone feels unmistakably personal. Netanyahu refers to the hostages not as bargaining chips or security matters, but as our children. His language is laced with empathy, perhaps an acknowledgement of the criticism he has faced from hostage families who accuse his government of acting too slowly. Some of those families, watching from home, describe this moment as bittersweet, vindication that their plight has finally been addressed, mixed with grief that so many of their loved ones will not return alive. As the press conference concludes, reporters shout questions about the exact timeline for the releases, about Hamas's internal divisions, and about the conditions of those still alive. Netanyahu does not answer directly. He simply reiterates that coordination with mediators is ongoing and that no final details will be made public until the hostages are safely back. His staff ushers him away from the podium as security personnel guide journalists out of the hall. Outside, the city hums with quiet anticipation. At the Western Wall, crowds gather spontaneously, men and women lighting candles, whispering prayers for those still in captivity. Tel Aviv's hostage square, illuminated by the glow of yellow ribbons and photographs, fills once again with families waiting for confirmation, for closure, for the call that could change everything. In the coming hours, Israeli media will replay Netanyahu's remarks on a loop, dissecting every phrase. Commentators will debate whether this signals the true end of the Gaza war or simply the beginning of its political aftermath. Yet one thing is certain, the numbers he spoke, 20 alive, 28 dead, will echo across Israel for years to come. etched into the nation's collective memory as a stark reminder of both loss and resilience. Diplomatic sources say preparations are already underway for what could be the largest homecoming ceremony since the 2011 Gilad Shalit exchange. The families of the confirmed dead will also be honoured in a national memorial planned for next week, alongside returning captives. Netanyahu is expected to attend both events, framing them as a testament to the unity and endurance of the Israeli people. In private briefings, aides to the Prime Minister say he views the hostages' return as both a moral imperative and a political lifeline. Amid mounting criticism over his handling of the war and Israel's international isolation, a successful conclusion to the hostage saga could restore his image, and at least temporarily, as the protector of the nation. But for many Israelis, this is not about politics. It is about closure, about bringing an unbearable chapter to an end. As night deepens over Jerusalem, the echoes of Netanyahu's voice linger. 20 alive, 28 taken and killed, numbers that now define the moral landscape of a nation still reeling from loss, yet clinging to hope. If Monday truly brings the day of national joy he envisions, it will not be a victory parade, but a collective act of remembrance, gratitude and healing. And somewhere in Gaza, in the tunnels and ruins that once defined a battlefield, the human cost of this long conflict continues to echo in the lives spared, the lives lost, and the fragile thread of peace that hangs between them.